Are we recording, by the way? Okay. No, it's all good. I just wanted to... I was like, before I just, like,
now
use
mine's
this... Before I just use this as an opportunity to, like, cold open transition into something, I should better make sure that we're actually all, like... Just, like, starts the show. No one else is actually recording. It's just me talking to an empty void.
Yeah, they have to... It's a Patreon goal to unlock everyone else.
Right,
We went over this last time.
Actually, like, yeah, no, that's the story of why Dylan's not here. It's not that Dylan isn't here for anyone who's listening. It's that Dylan just, he is the stretch goal. Billy was the stretch goal last time, and this time it's Dylan's the stretch goal. So if you donate...
We should just, like... we should pretend to be like, oh, Dylan, that's so funny. Oh,
yeah, just at random points.
That's great.
I have
Whoa,
actually
that's
started recording now.
Excellent.
Which I'm gonna trim.
Yeah,
my
I'm recording now as
mics
well.
a little bit. All right.
Sweet. We're all, we should all be
boy.
good then.
Yeah.
So.
I went this morning... just kind of start unrelated, as we always do. Yeah, why I'm so late. My brother bought a boat, like an old 1975, like beat up ass little like bass fishing boat, I guess. It's like a 15-foot boat. And he's just been super into it. And like it's not like my brother, it's not like, you know, a normal hobby of his, but he like rebuilt this whole boat and got it working, and he was like, "Do you want to come fish?" And I was like, I mean, I went fishing once when I was like 11, so sure, let's do it. But then
cool.
we ended up being out there a bit longer than we had planned. That's
You had
why I'm a
this,
little late,
you
but
had
it
this
was pretty fun.
family bonding experience.
Yeah, it was just me and my brother out there. We didn't catch anything, but like, you know, what are you gonna do? We got to putz around on the lake and fish a little.
You got to bring the water skis with you next time.
That boat's too small. I don't think you can like.
Well, that can be. There's a Christmas present idea for you. You could get him like a 200 horsepower outboard motor to strap to the back of this small fishing craft. And
no, his thing, it's got a gas engine, but like it's got some issues. Apparently, this boat sat in someone's backyard for like 20 years, right? But it has a gas engine. He just hasn't gotten it working yet, so he just has like a little electric. What is it called?
Trolling motor.
Yeah, trolling motor or whatever. So yeah, we just putzed around with that. I think it has like 9 horsepower.
Nice.
It's decent for a trolling motor.
Speaking of things that have low horsepower
and potentially electric motors.
Yes.
Yes. Welcome to Kakistocracy, episode on drones or unmanned area vehicles.
It's Jonathan. He's back. We thought we got rid of him, but he came back to hijack the show again.
He's holding us hostage
try harder
again.
Than that. You got to try harder than that, people. You can't just tie me in a chair in a basement.
Well, because as we'll discuss, Jonathan has a fleet of surveillance unmanned aerial vehicles that he was able to use even after we escaped him to relocate us and drag him back. They swooped in and grabbed us like some sort of sci-fi nightmare, and they carried us to an undisclosed location that I believe is similar to that giant flying stupid fortress thing from the new Black Widow movie.
I was gonna say it may or may not be owned by Amazon.
And that's where we are. We're back in Jonathan running the show. So please send whatever it was, Bitcoin or Ethereum or Doge, I don't know, Shiba Inu. Some of those nonsense things, digitally transfer those.
NFTs.
Send NFTs of Top Gun NFTs to this address, and maybe Johnny
only
will
the
let us
volleyball scene though. Playing with the boys, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Yes. How could any pilot not? Okay, so unmanned aircraft. So that, a couple weeks back we talked about manned aircraft into kind of the 20th century. Now we're going to talk about unmanned aircraft, because there's some funny stories along the way here and some great general incompetency. Before we were talking about the FAA, now we're just kind of a little more general, a little more big picture.
I mean, there's a lot of government institutions and militaries involved in this one. I'm pretty sure. So.
If we have to tentatively pick an organization, let's pick the U.S. Army, because they're the biggest. They're the biggest dum-dums in this episode by far.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when you're talking drones, excuse me. Like, I'm thinking my first thought was like civilian drones, right? Like a small little quadcopter or something. But then how large, like I assume the US military has very large unmanned drones, right?
Yeah, there's the upper limit. 'Cause you got like the X-37, which is like the mini space shuttle. That thing's huge.
Oh, all right, I'm gonna look that
That
up.
goes up.
X-37?
Yeah, it's kind of it's really spooky because it's like the Air Force basically acknowledges, yeah, it's a thing. It goes places.
Oh,
We're not gonna tell you anything else. Yeah,
That's
it just
an
goes up
unmanned
into
drone?
space. It goes up into space and it sits for weeks and months on end, and then it comes back down.
Wasn't one of its missions
Oh.
literally like 2 years that it just like hung out in orbit?
It
or
was
something?
a long time.
Okay, here we go.
It goes up and
780 days on the
That
fifth
is
mission.
super cool. I've never heard of this.
And that's how the Air Force would like it to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never heard of it. So yeah, the
And
definition.
yet here I am looking at a Wikipedia page.
Exactly. Thank God for open source intelligence. Yeah, so we should probably, before we even get too deep into this, we should address the elephant in the room. Why we've already gone back and forth. Why do we call it a drone? And why do some people call it an unmanned aerial vehicle, right? Where does this word drone even come from, right? Because it's kind of a weird word, and
Yeah.
the best I could come up with is, so like you go to the Webster definition of drone, right? And one of the definitions is an uncrewed aircraft or ship guided by remote control or onboard computers. And it's like, okay, how do we get that? And there's not a whole lot of information on it. The best I can find is it kind of relates to like worker male honeybees, right? Because those are called drones as well.
Okay.
And original, like kind of the early history, we'll get into this, is target drones. They called them target drones, and one of them was the de Havilland queen bee, which is a converted tiger moth, queen bee, maybe, right? Maybe, because it's not super clear definition there. Personally, I think it comes, and this there's some other people that tend to agree with me, is it comes from the vehicles making the engines make droning noises, because normally when you're listening to a propeller-driven airplane, the prop changes pitch, because the pilot's jockeying with the throttle and he's pitching and rolling and banking, and a lot of these drones, they would just fly in a really straight, really even line, and they would just kind of drone around, and it'd be like, okay, this is droning noise of the engine. So that kind of tended to stick because people call, those droning things, the target drones. And then in the 60s, especially the Army and the Air Force, they love their acronyms. They call them unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial systems, and whatever. But the press would want something that's a little more palatable for the general public, so they use the word drone. And there's just kind of this back and forth of the DoD's using unmanned aerial vehicle, and then the press would use the word drone. And eventually, now in the last 5 years or so, the FAA particularly has given up and just like, all right, it's a drone. You win.
There you go.
We just need to come up with an acronym that drone would stand for, and then we'll make them happy again. Like, what would it be? Like the dynamic robotic
aircraft, operational.
Just aircraft, but misspelled. Just Orcraft.
Yeah. Orcraft. Near Earth. I don't know.
There we go. Yeah. All right.
But then, so that's basically the history drone comes from. But then it's like, okay, what's a drone and what's a, we'll get into this. Anyway, let's actually go to the beginning before we get into that. So the very idea of an unmanned aircraft really does predate manned aircraft. You can go way back. You could argue a kite. A kite it's an unmanned aircraft, right?
It's a tethered drone.
Exactly. It
Yeah, fair
sustains.
enough.
It's designed to sustain flight, right? So that's an aircraft by the FAA's definition. We've been over this. Gliders, hand gliders, hang gliders. Well, hang gliders technically manned, but paper airplane, more advanced versions of paper airplane. The Wright brothers figured out their designs first with gliders that they would fly by string, kind of make them a kite. Balloons, unmanned balloons, observation balloons. Those are manned, but again, this kind of this idea of
is an arrow an unmanned aerial vehicle? We might be stretching.
That's a great question.
Yeah, that'd be more of a projectile, right? So that's you might as well go into like, okay, what's the difference between like a drone and a cruise missile? The answer
or
is
just a bullet, right? Like,
yeah, it's like, well, a cruise missile is designed to be fired and doesn't come back home, but as we'll get into some of these vehicles, that it's fair to call them drones, I think. Also, we're single use, designed to kind of be single use or maybe reusable. So it's a very blurry line. It turns out landing is really hard. Especially when you don't have a human being on board the vehicle, and that's something that is still like a major engineering challenge.
Well, it wasn't like there were literally land. Like, I can't remember what the one name of the drone was called. It was like a Pioneer or something. And didn't they just like literally just catch those things with nets? Like that was the landing system.
Oh, what? Right. Literally designed. Current modern designs like the Boeing Scan Eagle are designed to be caught in wires and nets. That's how we recover it. Yeah. This is like currently in service. Yeah. So Pioneer was the RQ-2. We'll talk about that one a little later. But yeah, modern design. It's still like kind of tricky. Like we've gotten pretty good at catching them in nets. Don't get me wrong. But it's still like why do we need wheels? Like doesn't have a human on board, right? We don't have to have a human climb into it or anything. But
just
anyway,
chuck it with a catapult and catch it with a net, and we save on landing gear.
Yeah, so drones with utility crazy. Though, right? True utility, kind of a dream, really, until the early 20th century, and they came about.
Are you just gonna crush the dreams of all these children flying their kites and say they have no utility, Jonathan? Is that what you're here to do?
I am. Those are toys for amusement. Right. Okay. Although I think there was somebody put a camera on a kite. That was like one of the first aerial photographs, if I'm not mistaken. But again,
the first NSA agent.
Yeah. Yeah. So a dude with a kite had a camera on it. It's like, okay, cool, but airplanes start becoming useful in the late teens, early 20s. Then the 20th century, 1920 or so. But airplanes are expensive, and single-use airplanes is something only the military could even begin to afford. So when we talk about UAVs and use cases, especially for the military, there's kind of we call them the 3 Ds of drone designs. Dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs are ones that are ideally suited for you want a vehicle that doesn't have a person in it. Right, so dull stuff, repetitive, boring, aerial survey stuff, patrol, what we call the ISR mission, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, right? Go fly for 6 hours in a circle over that town. Human pilot hates the idea. Drone doesn't care. Dirty work, right? Crop dusting, nuclear inspection, utility inspection, stuff where there's, exposure to hazards. Drones are good for that. Dangerous stuff, right? Aerial targets, right? Pilots generally don't appreciate getting shot at, especially by their friends.
Wasn't there a time during like the World War II era though where they would practice? I know they would practice with like basic drones basically, but didn't they also do essentially the sky advertising, except they were shooting at the banner? Where they would
towed targets. That's still a thing. That is neat. Literally still a thing today. one of my old bosses would fly a Learjet that was towing a target behind it.
How
And
far
they would reel it in, and it would have.
Oh my God. Yeah,
I think it was like a couple miles.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say don't miss. Like
Yeah, and it would come back, and it would have chunks taken out of it from the 20
Jesus.
millimeter shells.
Jeez.
Hey,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
like a couple miles is, I guess it's good, but in the grand scheme of the range of some of these weapons they're using, like, yeah, that is a little, like 2 or 3 miles. Like, make sure you're hitting the right radar blip there.
Like,
Yeah, make sure your radar locked onto the right thing, VID and all that. Yeah, so yeah, aerial targets. There's also if we want to talk modern for a second, is the Loyal Wingman, which is a Boeing design, I believe, that maybe it's Lockheed Martin, one of the big defense companies, has come with this idea. Basically, yeah, here's this $3 million thing that can be a missile truck, and also you could, if you have a missile coming towards you, you can have the Loyal Wingman get between you and it, right, and blow up, and we don't lose a pilot or a $70 million F-22 or something. So anyway, different, again, the kind of
the future of warfare is just like a series of drones flying into each other in like permanent stasis over
it's
an
just
ocean.
robots. Robot war.
Yeah. As much as this, we could get into the future.
We reached that perfect balance between, we figured out, like, where is the border between a cruise missile and a drone? We achieved that, and then it's just thousands of missile drones just impacting each other, and whoever runs out first loses, I guess.
Yep, war of attrition, more or less.
I mean, better that than a bunch of humans.
So yeah, so one of the first utilitarian, drones with utility was it's called the Kettering Bug. And it was the airframe was designed by the Wright brothers. The engine was designed by Ford, and they would launch it on a dolly. And it was basically a bomb with wings. So again, we're blurring the line of cruise missile, right? Because this thing was literally designed. They called it an aerial torpedo, and it would it had a little gyroscope in it that would tell you its heading. It had a basic altimeter that would let it keep altitude. And then it had a little thing up front that would count how many times the engine had revved, how many it had cycled, counted the revolutions of the engine. And once it hit a certain number, the engine would shut off and the wings would pop off and it would dive to Earth and explode.
Cool.
It didn't work. Shocker. It's spoiler.
Shocker,
it didn't work.
Yeah.
It was, there's footage of it. I put some in the chat. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. It had a penchant for crashing on takeoff. And even if it was in the air, it was really wobbly. Because it turns out 100 years ago, gyroscopes weren't that good.
Weird.
It would get into these weird oscillations.
I was told that we don't build them like we used to.
Well, that's true. But in a good way. Yeah. This thing was not great. Post-war, World War One. So this thing was kind of World War One-ish, kind of interwar period. They worked on it for a while.
This was the U.S. military doing this, right?
Yes. This is the Allies. This is we'll get to the other European.
Because I think most people, probably with like a knowledge of that era, I guess, would probably say that the V1 is like the first attempt at like a cruise
We'll get
missile.
to the V1. Yeah, we'll get to the V1. Yeah, the Kettering Bug predates the V1 by a while, but
it's just that the Kettering Bug didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work that great.
Okay, excellent.
So post World War One, you get radio control, right? Radios had come a long way, and are coming a long way. And this time, you're starting to get radio broadcast, and there's a lot being learned about radio control, and there's a lot of different forms of this. The most common is line of sight, which is where a human, watches the UAV, controls it by radio command, like a pilot. This is where we get the idea of the joystick as an analog for the aircraft flight control stick. The operator can be either airborne or ground-based. There's cases of both of these. Really, it's like a modern radio control aircraft, like a model aircraft. It's the same idea. They just scaled it up. In some cases, they would put like a flare on the aircraft, or some of the first missiles that were used this way would they basically guide the flare into the target. It's not a great method of control though, because you can screw it up pretty easily. It requires line of sight to the vehicle as well, because you have to be able to, the operators to see the vehicle to determine its orientation and all that. One particular interesting example of this World War II era, which is, again, this is where I said the U.S. Army is kind of the big loser of this, is Operation Aphrodite. Have either of you heard of Operation Aphrodite before?
No, I've heard of Aphrodite, okay. But
was it a beautiful success, as would be indicated by the name Aphrodite?
They were hopeful going into it, but no, spoiler, it wasn't. So let's say you're a general, right? You're a general in the army. World War II is on. The war is on. You're trying to defeat the Germans. You have a handful of bombers, B-17s. They've outlived their usefulness. They're old models. They're tired, but they're still airworthy. They're kind of dangerous to fly, but they're flight capable. Okay. What do you do with them?
Just based on like the conversation that we've been having, I assume it's something to do with we stick a crude radio-controlled apparatus in there that can control the flight controls, and then we probably like pack them full of bombs.
Yeah,
and try to fly
pack
them into
full
something.
Of explosions.
Correct. That is the correct answer. You pack it full of explosives, rig it to fly by radio command, and then you have a mission profile where you guide it to the target where it explodes. Problem. Overloaded bomber like this cannot take off autonomously. We've gotten the autopilot down to a point where it can kind of go level.
Oh, I just realized
can't take off autonomously.
Going. Oh no.
So how do you solve that?
Well, we have a guy get in, right? Okay.
No, not just one. We have two people.
Okay.
Two people get in. They have to manually take off, get the thing leveled out, activate all the control radios, arm the explosives, and then bail out over England.
Yeah, sweet.
Okay, yeah, fun.
Yeah.
It's like the first stage of a rocket. It's just that the first stage of the rocket is an actual like human being. It gets up in the air, and then it's the person that jumps off and falls back to Earth.
I'm not gonna lie though, what a sick fucking job title, right? Or like job that you have to do. I go up there and then just bail out of these fucking explosive airplanes.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to.
I have a feeling there might be a premature detonation or something about to happen.
So, of course, the Army and Navy worked on this separately. They both came similar ideas, but they worked on them separately because, of course. First mission for the Navy.
We can't work together, obviously. Like, why would we want to do such a thing? Like,
August 12th, 1944, first mission. So, just after D-Day. Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy. Yes, that Kennedy. One of multiple Kennedys to die by airplane. Is one of the two lucky souls on board. Gets the airplane in cruise. Aircraft unexpectedly explodes over Suffolk, England, damaging 60 buildings on the ground.
So it seems like it would have worked if it had just been over a German city or something.
Yeah. The mission was to take out the fortress of Mimolek, which I researched the correct French pronunciation for that, which is the German V3 launch site. But time to get into that. Basically, it was one of Hitler's wonder weapons. We'll get to that. That also didn't work. So the other mission, first Army mission, was a few days earlier. They had multiple aircraft. So one of the planes lost control after the flight engineer bailed out. Crashed near Oxford in the UK, making a huge crater. Destroyed more than 2 acres of the surrounding countryside. Killed the pilot.
Holy shit.
The other vehicle had its view obscured, so it missed the target by several hundred feet. The next mission, they actually got the vehicle on target, but it was shot down by flak. Because it turns out if you fly a bomber at low level, at medium speed in a perfectly straight line towards a target, it's an easy target for flak.
It's almost like you could use these things as target drones.
Almost, yeah. Another one missed their target by about 500 yards, which caused no damage. Another mission, 6th of August, more problems. Both crews successfully abandoned their B-17s without complications. One of the B-17s lost control and fell into the sea. The second also lost control, then turned inland and began to circle one of the larger towns in that section of the UK. Which, of course, freaked out autonomously.
Just this thing was possessed by a ghost and just starts haunting a British town.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And then after a good while, by some miracle, turns out to crash at sea.
Oh.
So I think they did 17 missions or something, somewhere along none of them worked.
That's a great success rate.
Yeah, they ended up killing, I think it was 30 people, I think, in total, killed and injured, all of them British or American. There were no confirmed enemy injuries or casualties as a result of this program. Yeah, it's just one of these cases maybe we bit off a little more than we could chew here.
Yeah, the world wasn't ready for this.
Yeah.
American kamikaze, turns out, doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
Fucking terrible.
Yeah, you gotta stay with the vehicle.
Literally could have had a better success rate if you just found a bunch of suicidal people and asked them to just fly the plane into a building, and still would have ended up killing less total people or something.
Probably, yeah. Interestingly, their method of control was they had 2 television cameras in the aircraft. One would watch out the nose, and the other one would watch the instruments. And the pilots would basically follow in another B-17, and then there'd be, I think, a chase Mosquito as well. Which that was one of the other stories of one of these just blew up in the air, and it actually took out the Mosquito that was following it as well.
What is a Mosquito?
It's a de Havilland Mosquito. It's a light bomber. The British built twin engine.
It's a blood-sucking parasite. They're very annoying.
Yes, that's the other Mosquito. Interesting to note is the Germans had the same idea a year later, and their version of it actually worked. It was called Mistletoe. And they would take these old Junkers 88s and fit them with explosives. And then they would have a fighter aircraft basically duct taped to the top.
Okay.
And the pilot, there'd be a pilot in the fighter aircraft, and he would take off with the whole contraption. And then he'd get towards the target, get on an attack run, and then pull a lever, and it would, cut the duct tape.
You just drop a plane.
It would drop the plane, and then the fighter would fly away back to base, and this Junkers 88 would go, and they, because there was actually a pilot aiming the thing, and he was actually on board, they were actually able to take out several bridges.
So I have a question, and I don't know the answer to this, but why is it more advantageous? Because it doesn't seem like they're getting a whole lot extra range or something out of it. Why is it more advantageous to literally have an extra plane that you're dropping with bombs on it rather than just dropping the bombs?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
You can get, because you don't have, they would literally take the whole nose off of the Junkers, and you'd get way more payload than you would just with a bomb. It was pointless to fly these things in combat because they just get shot down. It's going to get shot down. We might as well pack it with explosives and put it on a suicide course.
That's true. I mean,
so
you can just pack it with explosives as opposed to one explosive, right?
I guess, if you're taking the engine out, so you have weight savings there and no fuel, I would assume. So it's, they're just like filling.
Well, no, they still had it. It still had its engines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because it needed that for lift and thrust.
So it wasn't just that like the plane on top of it was towing it or something. It was like
no.
So it's still fully functional.
Yeah.
And then,
but
okay.
If you look at pictures of it, it's the Mistel, Mistel. It's because it was a fighter on top and a bomber underneath, and this weird.
Now, what year was this?
1945.
That is kind of nuts that they were able to like.
Yeah.
Control another plane remotely.
I have found the image. This is This is quite the thing. Okay.
Yeah. They only built a handful of them, and like I said, they did get a handful. They did I think they only got like 1 or 2 on target because they had a lot of the same problems of they would potentially drift off course or they get shot down. Of course, Germans had supply chain problems.
Oh wow, yeah. No, I'm looking at the pictures too. That's nutty.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts, but it was kind of one of those things like too little, too late. Because at this point, like they were using them to try to drop these bridges to stop the Soviets, but it's like, okay, you drop the bridge, and 18 hours later, the Soviets have a pontoon bridge.
Yeah, it does seem a bit like a German solution to like what's the most expensive way that we could blow up this bridge.
I will say, like, I don't know anything about airplanes really, but these German planes look really cool, like design wise.
Look, say what you will about National Socialism, it produced some pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, they look neat. Oh, this one's got a big swastika on the back of it, but otherwise the design of the craft looks great. Yeah,
millions dead, cool airplane. Who's to say?
Yeah. Pro, cool engineering. Con, millions of dead people. Okay. So while we're talking about Nazi super weapons, we're
all canceled, by the way. So
immediately canceled.
Yes.
Okay.
We should probably talk about some of the Vergeltungswaffen or vengeance weapons.
Okay.
The V1, for example. Yes, which is, as I have it in the notes here, a Kettering Bug that freaking works. That's basically the V1. 1942 to 1945, these things were flying. Yes, it has so instead of a conventional propeller engine, we have a pulse jet, which is basically controlled explosions. That's the of course all engines are basically controlled explosions, but this one is more so than others. Basically, you just squirt a fuel air mixture into a chamber, it explodes. You have these louvers basically on the front that slam shut, and then there's this gas that gets shot out the back and it goes forward. It's dead simple, like really, really simple as far as an engine. Like we're talking about like 3 moving parts in the whole engine.
I'm impressed that it didn't pointlessly have like 78 other components just because it's the Germans we're talking about here. Like all precision milled.
Oh, we'll get there. Yeah. So they're super loud. They had an autopilot, again, compass and gyroscopes, but better than the Kettering Bug.
Or an autopilot. You get it because it's German.
Yes. Interestingly enough, though, the Germans had the exact same mechanism as the Americans back in the day for determining when the target was reached. They had a little itty bitty propeller on the nose that would turn, and after a certain number of turns, it would arm the bomb. After a certain number more turns, it would cut this cable that would cause the tail to basically lock in like the nose down position and just basically force it into a dive, and then it would dive in and crash. There's a whole long story that I can't get into how like the British were using spies to convince the Germans that the that the V1s were falling short of target. So then they would keep making them go, or no, they were going beyond London, and so then the Germans would put less fuel in them to make them, or tune the mechanisms so that they would think they were putting them on target. They're actually putting them short of target. One of the other things they came up with was to have a special V1 that would pop a wire out the back. It would like eject this wire and have it trailing behind it, and it would then broadcast a signal that they could pick up back home and do accurate range finding of this thing and figure out where it crashed. And the ranging data was saying, no, these things are going short of target, but the spies were all saying, no, they're going long of target. And basically there's this one, colonel way up, and he's like, well, I'm going to believe the spies, not this unreliable technical data. And anyway, interesting. I thought the story of like espionage. Yeah, we could talk about World War II espionage and
counterintelligence.
Yes. So yeah, that was the V1, basic Kettering bug that actually worked. Launched thousands of these things at London.
And wasn't one of the preferred techniques when they intercepted them to like get them knocked out of the sky rather than shooting at them was to like fly and like try and tip their wing?
They could shoot at them. They'd use radar to detect them. They would shoot at them. But one of the other techniques they would use, particularly with the Gloucester Meteor, the Meteor jet, because it was really fast, would be to come up alongside these things, and just tip them over with hit them with the wing, and gently and roll them over, because the autopilot wouldn't be able to correct from that, and then it would just crash.
But if it crashed, the payload would explode, right?
Yes.
But presumably short of the target, I think.
They would, they would do this short of the target. Yep. And just take out some cow and field.
We have ground beef now.
Okay, fair.
Yes. Yes. Also, there's the V2, which is more of a cruise missile. It's actually a ballistic missile. Many of the same technologies of compass, gyroscopes, but this is just a rocket. It just goes up and then it comes down. Makes it impossible to counter because it's going so fast. You also don't have any warning either because it's supersonic when it comes in. So it explodes before you hear it coming. Yeah. Yeah, that's terrifying. Bananas. Yeah. On the more boring side of things, we have the Radioplane company over in the U.S. building smaller scale drones. These are basically RC airplanes, but they're like 1/3 scale for target practice by anti-aircraft crews. So you're gonna have an operator that would control this thing and make it turn or whatever, and then would give train any AA crews on how to shoot things down. Interesting footnote: Marilyn Monroe was discovered in the entertainment industry while she was working in the Radioplane factory building Radioplane drones. So, yeah.
That is a very interesting tidbit.
Yeah, there's actually a picture of her working. It was like she was doing that, like modeling. Anyway, the Radioplane. There's a picture of her like working on. You can tell it's this little drone. So yeah, as the years go by, we get better gyroscopes, inertial navigation, which I don't know if you're familiar with that meme of the missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't. That's what that is. Inertial navigation, measuring drift. All these technologies. And then the Cold War happens, which increases defense spending budgets to justify single-use airplanes again.
Well, because it's the Cold War, and so you don't want to have a manned aircraft because it's very chilly.
Yes,
and so it's easier to have an unmanned aircraft because it won't complain as much about being, frostbitten.
Exactly.
Makes perfect sense to me.
So I feel like the Kakistocracy element of this episode is really more just like that. It seems like the predominant use of these vehicles at this point is governments just trying to kill people.
Yep.
So
pretty much, yeah, or train people to be better at killing.
Yeah, or kill people, but without getting your own people killed, but also still managing to get your own people killed half the time.
Yeah, a lot of that, because a lot of times these things would like the V2s, like the fuel was so volatile that like if it just touched at all, it was even close to each other, it would just explode. Like they're just so incredibly volatile that like the fueling ports were like super clearly marked in every way, because like if you just got one drop in the wrong spot, it would just explode.
What the
Yeah.
fuck?
Yeah. it's just unbelievably volatile. And also like the chemicals by themselves were like volatile and corrosive and toxic, and
Are they super
Yeah,
corrosive
being
too?
mixed.
Where like if you fuel it, you only have a limited amount of time that you have to launch, or else it's just gonna like destroy the fuel tank. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
awesome.
you have to fuel it and then immediately launch it, or you're done. Yeah.
What
Super
even, dude?
cool. There was
Yeah.
like some story about some Russian ICBM that blew up because of that, because they were trying to do a test launch in the 60s and they fueled it and they had a problem and they're like, well, we can fix it and then we can still do the test launch, but meanwhile, like, it's this highly corrosive fuel, so everyone's just like working on this now fueled ICBM as the fuel is just like slowly eating the
Oh
fuel
my
tanks,
god.
and then eventually that reaches the point where, you know, enough of it gets out of containment or whatever, and yeah, the whole thing blew up and killed like 90 people or something. So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice. That's just, yeah, just great. Fantastic.
So, the airplane's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the most successful drones of the last 50 years, because it's been in production for this entire time, is the Ryan Q2 Firebee, which is basically a jet engine with a couple of wings and a little compartment up front for some instrumentation. And this thing it's really fast. It can do turns. It can maneuver like an enemy fighter jet almost. It can be programmed to do all this stuff without input from somebody else. So you just send it out to run up and down a range and train pilots to
Oh
shoot at moving
wow.
targets. Yeah, it's jet powered. It would, but again, we have this problem of, okay, how do we take off and land? Well, we either drop it from a C-130 or launch it with a rocket, get it going. And then when it's time to come in, we just have it pop a parachute, and to be that
Yeah.
will either be snagged by like a helicopter or just land softly enough that it can be recovered. So this thing was used for aerial target, as an aerial target, of course, and then they later adapted it in Vietnam as a recon vehicle. It would basically fly along a certain route and take pictures, and then the picture would come out, and it would, yeah, yeah, just kind of crazy. Um, Even crazier was the QH-50 Dash. The H, as you may have noticed, stands for helicopter.
I did a
This is actually,
presentation about this once.
yeah, it's basically a mini helicopter that drops nuclear depth charges, as you
Right.
do.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, what else would you do with it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
exactly. Or torpedoes, but who cares about torpedoes? Those are boring.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the original proposed problem they were trying to like breach, which also yeah involved. I mean, the nuclear depth charges were essentially for the same reason, but like the idea was like, well, we can detect submarines or theoretically detect submarines from further away than like our torpedoes can travel from the ship. So what if we launch a thing?
it was part, yeah, it was part of it. Basically, the Soviets were building submarines faster than the U.S. was able to build modern anti-submarine frigates. So it was like, well, crap. Well, wait, if we put little helicopters on these smaller frigates that can't fly normal helicopters, we make them more capable
Mm-hmm.
to fight the Soviets.
Huh.
Yeah.
So you're
So,
essentially using it as like a range extender for your torpedo.
yep,
Um,
yep.
so
Yeah, pretty cool. Used them until 2006 as target tugs, because again, dull, dirty, dangerous. They can just keep going. They would be remote controlled by a human for takeoff and landing, but then they could be commanded to, fly a certain grid search area or whatever. And so that was the first truly unmanned offensive drone. that, wasn't, because you argue, well, the V1's kind of a cruise missile. Like, this thing is reusable and can go on a mission to kill people and come back and then be reused and go on another mission.
And that's really what's important at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we want to be able to kill people multiple times, because that's where you get efficiency,
Yeah.
And you can start to do, like specialization and how you're killing the people with a particular process, and you can sort of become better at that and expand it and adapt it to other techniques. And, eventually you can have one person killing thousands of people very easily, and it's just a far more streamlined system than any previous way of killing people. Because really the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah. Another particularly just bonkers design. Like, this one is just nuts. This is like pure unadulterated 1960s, chain smoking slide ruler Kool-Aid. The D-21 tag board. So this thing was supposed to go Mach 3.3 at 90,000 feet to do reconnaissance. Right, really blurring the line between aircraft and spacecraft, right? Like, this is even higher and faster than an SR-71. So the D is not for drone; it's for daughter. So originally it was launched at Mach 3 by an A-12, which the A-12 is basically an SR-71 but different and run by the CIA. Which became the M21. So the A-12, the 12, and turned to 21. So then it was the mother 21 and the daughter 21. They redesigned it. So originally it was an A-12, and they changed it to the M21 after the fourth launch. The vehicle didn't come away correctly, and it took out I think one of the tails of the A-12. The pilot and backseater ejected safely, but then the backseater landed in the ocean because he was wearing this big pressure suit. He drowned. So after that, they figured out, maybe we don't need to fly this thing at Mach. So the reason they had to carry it on an A-12 was because they had to launch it at Mach 3 because it had a ramjet engine, and a ramjet only works if you're going fast when you start it. So the only aircraft that could carry it that fast was the A-12. Then they changed the launch mechanism. They said, maybe that's a little outlandish. Instead, let's just take a regular cargo airplane and drop it off of that. But we still need to get to Mach 3, so let's put a giant rocket, like a giant rocket, from a B-52. So the B-52 would carry it to 30 some odd thousand feet. And then it would drop it. This rocket would ignite, carry it to Mach 3. The ramjet would ignite. It would fly over. I think they sent 2 of them into China, and one of them crashed in China, and the other one,
I see this.
Don't really know what happened to it.
We have a picture of a D-21 wreck on display in a Chinese aviation museum.
Yep. How'd that get there? Huh? Yeah. And then the planned mission profile of this thing is that it would eject the film over the water somewhere, and then a C-130 or a ship would pick it up. Didn't work very well. Eventually, as the 60s turned into the 70s, somebody rightfully said, maybe this is dumb because we have spy satellites, we have spy aircraft. We don't need an aircraft that's somewhere between the two. It's just dumb.
All of this just sounds like people or governments with too much money and wanting to have fun.
Yeah.
Because these things sound like fun projects.
Yeah, right. I mean, that is fair. Like, what if we just made a drone?
Slap a rocket to it. Let's go.
The Kerbal Space Program solution to,
Yeah, more boosters.
Yeah. I love that. I like the idea that maybe all of the reason why there's so many redundant systems is because they're all classified, and so they're just unaware of each other existing. And so you just end up with these overlapping.
That's a good theory. I mean, it could very well have happened at multiple points during the 60s. See, of course, everyone's on drugs at the time too. So
a CIA and MI6 agent bump into each other on their way to assassinate some third world country's pro-communist leader. Like, oh, you guys were also doing this. Neat.
Yeah. Oh dear. Anyway, so yeah, as we're getting into the mid 70s here, technology is improving somewhat. So then there's these these crafty desert people who worship the one true God. Wait, that's not specific enough. They've got a lot of money. No.
Oh no.
They got special dietary rules.
Oh
I
no.
think.
That's
Yeah.
actually
They don't like
multiple
pigs.
people. That's also
Yeah.
other people that live in the desert too. There are multiple religious desert dwelling groups that all still
I know. They have their own
you're,
religious calendar. It's like a special calendar with its
You're
own
talking
dates.
about Texas, right? This is Texas.
They've all got dark
eat lots of
hair.
pork though. They've all got
that's true.
dark hair.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
they celebrate
who
Hanukkah.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I just didn't want to. Okay.
Yeah. So the Jews, the Israelis, right? They decide they need an eye in the sky in the late 1970s.
You think God would just hook them up and like tell them what was going on?
You'd think, but they want a real-time battlefield data link. They don't
Okay.
want to have to get a priest out for this all the time.
Right.
So they create
Fair
the
enough.
Tadiran.
It's like Minority Report where there's just like 3 Jewish priests sitting in a tank foreseeing the battle.
Everything. Okay.
Or no, there's 6 of them and they're sitting at the points of a Star of David.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. If we weren't canceled before, now we're definitely canceled.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
This is the secret episode. You have to give to our Patreon to get this one.
Exactly. So we have the Tadiran, we have the massive.
Dylan was
basically
actually
the
pretty
same
smart to set this one
design.
out.
Yes. Yeah. His reputation will survive intact.
He works in the media industry. He can't be associated with this conversation.
Exactly. Oh gosh. Anyway, so the U.S. notices these designs, probably through the CIA. Says, that's kind of cool. Let's copy their homework, and they field the RQ-2 Pioneer, which later becomes the RQ-7 Shadow, which they're basically the same thing. And I actually worked with some guys who worked on Shadow,
Oh, yeah.
and when they were like debugging it, they would, or they're flying, and they would know when they had really messed something up because the error messages would be in Hebrew.
Get down to like
Code
the
from the
base
computer.
level programming.
Yeah, like
Oh my god.
yeah. Yeah. So these vehicles are like a whole new breed. They've got real-time like video data link, way better than the 1940s TV that like Project Aphrodite had. That's actually usable, and they can actually bring it not just to a mothership, but to a all the way back to like a command center. The commander can actually view this footage in real time. They've got autopilots. They've got lasers that can be used to guide laser-guided bombs, or just point out things.
Oh, I get it now. This is the early version of the Jewish space laser. It's the Jewish air laser.
Oh,
Yeah. They didn't quite have the budget for a space program at the time, so you gotta start small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Proof of concept.
Yeah, and the bigger ones can carry their own bombs too. The big draw to them is that they can sit on station for hours. I can't remember what war they fought. I think it was 1982, early 80s. It wasn't Yom Kippur, but one of the other wars, one of the many wars.
That would have been the
Israelis
one
used
with
them.
Operation Mole Cricket 19. Probably.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It was Operation Mole Cricket 19. They used
I
these
literally
things
knew
to
that offhand,
tremendous effect.
listeners. I literally pulled that one out of my head. I don't know how I specifically remembered that, but there you go.
I remember you did some research on that years
Well,
back.
it's the largest modern air battle involving jet aircraft on both sides and resulted in, I want to say, like 80 kills. So it's the largest modern like dogfight. So it's kind of cool for that reason.
Yeah, there was a massive SAM hunt as well, and that's what the Mastiff and these vehicles were used for. They would spot these SAMs And they were so small, I'm pretty sure the Soviet SAMs couldn't lock onto them. It's like they wouldn't notice them because they're basically stealth by being small. It's like, no, that can't be an enemy aircraft. It's too small. There's not enough of a return. So they'd be able to watch these things, and guide them in. Anyway, very effective. This is where we get to, Predator, Reaper, the killer drones, the kind that you see in the media all the time. They're still remotely piloted. They still have to generally be manually landed and taken off. So there's some automation in there, but they're generally much, much more capable. They can land like normal airplanes. They put wheels on them. They can carry, manned grade weapons, the same kind of bombs like an F-16 or an A-10 would carry. They have SATCOM data link now. So now this is literally a case of where you get people in North Dakota, up in Grand Forks. Those guys are the ones steering all the, Predators and Reapers over in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like they're steering them from the States because they have this SATCOM, military satellite data link that can communicate and send this footage back, and, to the Pentagon or wherever. So, yeah, pretty cool. Also, as Paul was making earlier, much better at killing people. Yeah. I don't know if you noticed, but up to this point, it's been all military vehicles.
Hence the killing people, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It turns out civil organizations, they just don't have the use cases or the budget to justify
or the legal ability.
Yeah, the logistics and the support staff required, and the mission availability rates on a lot of these things are not great. And there were some cases like the Aerosonde, which is a vehicle. Is interesting because the Aerosonde is a vehicle I was trained to work on, and the original prototype version 1 Aerosonde, the version I worked on, was much later. Version 1 Aerosonde was actually a civil design. It was designed to do weather research, and it was the first air vehicle that was flown into a hurricane. I think one of them survived, and the other one didn't, and then another one flew across the Atlantic, and it was the first vehicle, the unmanned vehicle, to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And it was later immediately done with a different unmanned vehicle. But that was in the 1990s. So that wasn't until then, that the civil unmanned vehicles actually become feasible, and it's because digital electronics are becoming cheaper, and then of course we get GPS. That's a huge technology for this kind of thing because now there's no longer you can get this really lightweight, low power receiver, and that's your solution for positioning, and it's pretty good. It's good enough. You know where the
game
thing
changer.
is.
Yeah, I'm imagining trying to create a drone that navigates off of VORs. That would be something.
Yeah, I wonder. I imagine some of Predator and whatnot probably have TACAN in them, but I don't know. Yeah, that radio data link is, a lot of times military put that in there as a backup, but for the most part they're using GPS. And it's really not until 2000s, 2010s, recent history that civil vehicles become a thing. You get the lithium ion battery is the big thing. So, thanks to those children in Tanzania, we get cheap energy dense batteries that enable things like half-hour flights on $500 vehicles that have real-time data link streams. They have cameras with gimbals on them that make smooth footage. And there's a little Chinese surveillance sprinkled in there as well. It's part of why it's $500, not $700. You gotta let President Xi watch over your shoulder whenever he wants. But so now we have hundreds of designs. You see these quadcopters now, right? And that comes from up to this point, electric batteries, right? Like a having a NiCad battery, something that's okay, that's cool. It can fly for 5 minutes, right? It's that's stupid. But with lithium ion, it's no, that quadcopter design, it's not very aerodynamically efficient, but it's really it can take off and land really easy. It can fly. any direction, up, down.
Yeah, it's also like extremely stable, I believe.
Well, it's stable. Yeah, it's stable because you have electric motors where you can fine tune the torque
and you have
easily, really quickly.
Four different points that you can adjust to make that happen.
Yep, and yeah, it makes it, the technology for that hasn't come together until like I said, the last 10 years or so, really. And that's kind of where we get to the part of history. It's kind of still being written, right? The implications of all this technology.
And that's why I can have my Chinese spy drone that folds up into a neat little package, and I can carry it around with me and take 4K video for under $1,000.
Exactly.
So
now we have this design being scaled up into electric air taxis, which are basically flying cars. The favorite of the futurists and the tech journalists. That's not a thing yet. It's kind of a thing, right? I think there's a couple companies that are starting to build. They basically call them like flying motorcycles or whatever, and they're like like $70,000, and they can only fly for 30 minutes, but it's becoming a thing. It's just not a thing yet, and now we're talking about future technology, and it's supposed to be a history podcast and all, but yeah, that's drones.
So thank you for droning on about the drone.
Yes.
Well, now,
that's perfect. That's like an hour down to the second.
That was pretty darn good. Yeah, thank you. I mean, so for those of you wondering, for the one listener who may or may not have made it this far, we are doing King Leopold Part 2. It will hopefully be up next week, short of catastrophic events. But we took a little bit of a break from that just because I'm still scripting Part 2 because it's a bit of a slog, I'll put it that way. No spoilers, but a lot of people die, and not in I mean, not that it's ever fun when people die, but you can kind of laugh at these European explorers when they slog across the continent and just are casually destroying villages along the way, because it's just what's even the point of this? It's so stupid. It's comedy equals tragedy plus time or whatever. But
sure.
When you're talking about just essentially genocide, it gets a little less fun. Anyway, thanks, Jonathan, for jumping in.
Here's the thing we forgot to ask, though, right? How many AKs does it take to build one of these drones?
Ooh. One for a small one.
For a small one.
One
What about
plus.
these the big bombers, right?
So Global Hawk.
Some of these big drones certainly cost more than in Alaska.
Oh, definitely, they have to.
Yeah, so a Global Hawk is. Oh, they don't have a price on here. Wait. $800 million.
Holy! So literally 100 Alaskas for a global.
God.
I think that
you could buy more land. Wait, hold on a second.
That was for 4 of them.
Oh wait, okay, 4. So it's 200 million each.
Yeah.
Okay, but
200 and change. Yeah.
Okay, so Alaska, right? Alaska land area is 663,000 square miles. And what is... Well, it's giving me...
Let's see.
Okay, so all of the land area on Earth is 57.5 million. So if we do 57.5 million divided by 660,000, we get 87. So you could conceivably buy, if you could get all of the land on Earth for the going price of an Alaska, when the United States bought Alaska, you could conceivably buy all of the land on Earth for the price of the Global Hawk program.
Very nice. So that was 4 of them being sold to South Korea, I should mention. So, and a lot of these are probably the avionics up front. That's usually most of the cost. As far as back to AKs, an RQ-4 weighs 32,000 pounds.
Jesus.
So an AK-47.
But a lot of that's probably like composites and stuff that you couldn't necessarily like. We could make a bunch of future AKs. We just use metal.
I would say I think it's probably mostly aluminum.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it could
so
be.
We come up with some weird aluminum barrel. I didn't know if we'd have like some weird composites where we have to make all the furniture of the AKs out of like cool futuristic looking material.
Well, yeah, of course.
I mean, you could conceivably sell some of the parts and turn them into wood. You know, change the money and buy wood. But so an AK is about 7 pounds, right?
That sounds about
right. Let's see, 30. How many thousand did I say? 30. Let's see, 30. 32,250. Let's see, calculator. 32,000 divided by 7.5. 4,200 AKs, somewhere around there.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Now, the real question is, how many AKs could we buy with Alaska?
That is the most important question that we have ever asked on this podcast.
I mean, where are we buying them, right?
That's a fair question. That's why I'm trying to figure out like how much it cost the Soviet Union to make an AK-47, which I know this gets into like funny money territory.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say because like if you're trying to get in Somalia, I think you can get an AK-47 for like 2 goats, something like that,
or 5 chickens.
It's a typical range for an AK 2800 to 3600.
That sounds expensive.
That does sound expensive. That says on the dark
costs
net,
$700, but I just have a lame civilian AK. So but if
a genuine AK-47 is an NFA Class 3 weapon, and it would likely cost somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
Right. See, that's like a Type 1. That's like a golden goose.
Like right? That's if we go on Gunbroker and look up transferable AK-47. Yeah. Hold on, let's go on Machine Gun.
Okay, here we go. TrueGunValue.com. The average price is $938. That sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I'm trying to find if I can find one on Gunbroker right now, and unfortunately, I'm not seeing. There's plenty of AR pattern stuff up for sale at the moment, but I'm not seeing any AKs. Got a G3 here. That's fun. Here's an AK. Here we go. $25,000 for this one here. Okay. So, but that's obviously, just because of law, not really the raw material cost of that particular item. So, but $930. So then we punch in our 7 million divided by 938. So we get about 7,500 AKs for Alaska.
It's pretty good. That's like a full army.
Yeah,
it's like a division at least. Yeah, I mean, a couple of motor rifle brigades.
What's the better purchase, though?
I feel like Alaska was naturally. If we could get 7,000 people to come along with the AKs to give them to, and then we can accomplish tasks with those people and their AKs, perhaps we could, that might be the better purchase. But I feel like if we just get Alaska and all of the raw materials therein, I feel like we're probably coming out ahead. I feel like we could probably get more than $7 million of oil rights recouped right away.
Yeah.
Not to mention you could probably mine some, iron and steel and whatnot, and craft that into AKs.
Yeah, of course. So actually, The real question is, how many AKs can we craft out of Alaska if we buy it?
It's just AKs all the way down, man. It's just...
Yeah.
Well, again, because AK and Alaska both have the same abbreviation.
Yeah.
I think that's important to remind people.
Indeed.
Anyway, we've thoroughly derailed this episode of Kakistocracy. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Jonathan.
We didn't derail enough during it, so we had to save it for the end. You know?
Yeah, we just had to have nonsense at the end about AKs.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for recording the show.
Yeah.
No problem. Pleasure to be on, and hopefully I'll return at some point with more cool facts in history.
Sounds
cool
good.
Facts.
Indeed.